we're thinking about this way of Jesus through the book of Luke. And today we're thinking about the way of investing. He's gonna speak about what we're invested in. And investing is a challenge, right? It's, you have a hunch, a tip, maybe you have a broker or a report or something that's convinced you to put something into, make an investment in something with the hope of return. Some of you watch the show Shark Tank. Where these budding entrepreneurs make a pitch. They are hoping that they can sell off their company or part of their company to these billionaire investors. And in 2015, in their 7th season, Shark Tank gave out their first $1 million offer. Now, interesting enough, it went out to a kid who grew up here in the Rock. His name's Jeff Overall. What do we call him? Iceman? Iceman. He was like the star of our ski and snowboard trips, but he had developed this company. He made lenses for in a company called Polar Pro, filters for lenses for the emerging GoPro and drone market. And I remember watching, I'm like, that's Jeff. They just gave Jeff $1 million. It was pretty fun to kind of watch the whole thing happen. It made me think about, we had a group of high school students here at The Rock. This one class of guys, they were just a group of friends, really, really, really bright guys. They went off to UCLA, USC, Notre Dame, MIT, all these prestigious colleges. And then they had this one friend who went to a state school, but not even a state school in California. And he just as bright as all the rest of them, but for whatever reason, this is where he wound up going. All these guys have turned out to be amazing, successful guys. But what's interesting is the one guy who didn't go to all those schools, he was focused on something different at the time. He was invested in something different. Maybe you've heard of it. It's called Bitcoin. Now, I can't explain what Bitcoin is to you. I don't know how cryptocurrencies work and stuff, but he was into this, I don't know, 10, 15 years ago. He started getting involved in it. I asked one of our old youth leaders, I said, how is he doing? He said, last I heard, last month, he was scouting out a $43 million home on the Laguna coast overlooking the ocean. Not a bad investment, if I might say, as far as earthly things go. It's interesting when we think about investing that Jesus actually wanted us to think about the investments we make as well. He wanted us to think about the things that we are investing in, and he was concerned of whether or not we were focused on investing in eternal things. If you think back a few weeks ago, as we've been going through the book of Luke, in Luke 9, he challenges us to make an investment with your life, that you would give your life away to him, right? It's an investment. You're gonna take a chance, you're gonna take a risk, you're gonna give him your life, you're gonna take up your cross daily, deny yourself, take up your cross daily and follow him. But in return, he says, if you'll give your life away, I will give you life in return. And the life I give you will be everlasting, abundant, eternal life. It's a risk, certainly. There's a cost, definitely. But there is a reward that comes from it. And again, Jesus begins to see that if you invest in eternal things, there will be a return that comes to you from this. But he also is willing to say to us, there are warnings. There's a sense that someday you will give account of your life. That last song kind of takes your breath away a little bit, right? But you will stand before the great I am one day. You will give account of your life. And Jesus is saying, hey, think about that moment. Think about that time. It's not trying to manipulate you or terrify you, but let that be a day of reward and blessing. Think about who you are and what you're giving yourself to. Jesus warns us that for some of us, we will work hard to gain the whole world and yet forfeit our souls in return. It's not a good return on your investment. And so Jesus is going to challenge us to invest ourselves into the things that last, eternal things. Here's a big idea that we're gonna see today, that the way of Jesus turns our focus to eternal investments. to eternal investments. Jesus wants us invested in eternity. But not just the eternal things, Jesus wants you to be invested in people. Jesus wants you to make investments that yield what he calls eternal friendships, eternal results. And so when Jesus speaks, he invites us to see that there's more to this life than just this world. That sometimes we spend all our energy just trying to make it in this world. And he's saying, I wish that you can think about how you give some of that energy, that same kind of energy, for things that matter beyond just this life. So let me invite you to turn to Luke chapter 16. Luke chapter 16, we're gonna read verses 1 to 15. And as we turn there in the Bibles, if you have a Bible in front of you, I'd really highly encourage you to have the text open. The Bible's in front of you, your app, whatever you're gonna use, page 1048 Bible's in here, because this, like last week, is one of those things where you're like, what? What did he say? Like, it feels like this is off. Like, I'm not sure I'm following you, because it sounds like you just commended a bad guy, all right? And it's really important that you kind of follow along in the story, because Jesus has a twist in this story, this parable that he wants to tell. And as we listen to it, it's really important that as we listen to it, that we try to see in the midst of kind of the chaos of the story, he's trying to make a principle. He's trying to teach a lesson. The audience that he has are his disciples. But what we often find is that Jesus would be in positions where he's teaching his disciples, but he also has onlookers. So he's got people who are choosing to be students or maybe thinking about being students, as well as the ones that are committed to be his followers. But then he also has onlookers. Many times it is the religious leaders of whatever city or town that he's in, and they're not happy with him. Because in many ways, Jesus is pointing out the ways that they think about God and the world, and he's revealing the real nature of their hearts. If you've been reading through the SOAP, so we're going through the book of Luke, and we're reading through it part by part each day, and then on Sundays we're looking at things. The chapters that have led up to today, he's told a number of stories, a number of parables. Parable is a story he tells. He's telling a story and he's laying a truth alongside of it. He's trying to bring something, and you have to think about it a little bit. But as he's doing this, he's been telling these different stories. He's trying to explain the heart of God. And he's trying to explain to them the things that are important to God, but in doing so, he's also revealing the heart of those who oppose him. He's gonna do it once again in this one. In chapter 15, people didn't understand why he would hang out with sinners. And so he tells stories about a lost coin, a lost sheep, a lost son. And each time you see the joy of heaven when one lost sinner finds their way back to God. Now he's gonna speak again about something, and you'll see that he's trying to challenge his disciples, but at the same time, he's challenging his opponents. And so let's look together at verses, starting verse 1. It says, Jesus told his disciples, okay, here's his main audience. He gives them a story. So try to imagine you're standing in the marketplace and Jesus is sitting there aside, he's teaching, you're sitting there listening. He gives you the story. He wants you to think about it. He says, there was a rich man whose manager was accused of wasting his possessions. So he called him in and asked him, what is this I hear about you? Give an account of your management, because you cannot be manager any longer. The manager said to himself, what shall I do now? My master's taken away my job. I'm not strong enough to dig, and I'm ashamed to beg. I know what I'll do so that when I lose my job here, people will welcome me into their houses. So he called in each of his master's debtors. He called the first. How much do you owe my master? 900 gallons of olive oil, he replied. The manager told him, take your bill, sit down quickly, and make it 450. Then he asked the second, and how much do you owe? 1,000 bushels of wheat, he replied. He told him, take your bill and make it 800. The master commended the dishonest manager because he had acted shrewdly. For the people of this world are more shrewd in dealing with their own kind than are the people of the light. I tell you, use worldly wealth to gain friends for yourself so that when it is gone, you will be welcomed into eternal dwellings. So he's finished the story, he's given a little bit of commentary, and now he digs in even deeper. He says, verse 10, he says, whoever can be trusted with very little can be trusted with much, and whoever is dishonest with little will also be dishonest with much. So if you've not been trustworthy in handling worldly wealth, who will trust you with true riches? And if you've not been trustworthy with someone else's property, who will give you property of your own? No one can serve two masters. Either you will hate the one and love the other, or you'll be devoted to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve both God and money. Now notice here the extra audience. The Pharisees, these religious leaders who loved money, heard all this and were sneering at Jesus. He said to them, you are the ones who justify yourselves in the eyes of others, but God knows your hearts. What people value highly is detestable in God's sight. Now, it's important that we kind of pull this story apart to make sense of it because Jesus is trying to make an important point. So the story, you've got an owner and you got a manager, right? Someone who's in charge of taking care of all the owner's affairs. Now, he's doing a poor job. It doesn't seem like he's doing anything illegal because Jesus doesn't include authorities or anything like that. But it seems in some ways he's slacking off. He's being maybe too selfish for himself. He's doing something that's caught the attention of the owner enough to say, you're fired. Right? So he's got to figure out what he's going to do. He realizes, I can't do hard labor and I'm too proud to beg. Like, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? What am I going to do? And he comes up with this idea. Notice the idea, he takes advantage of the situation. Now, this part of the story is where scholars aren't really sure what is exactly happening here. But there's two things that, as we try to think of this culturally, two possibilities. One is the owner he's got the oil, right? 900 gallons, that's a whole harvest. That's a lot of oil. So whatever it is that he has, whatever he's charging, it's possible that he's hired this manager to say, hey, here's what I have, here's what I want, whatever you get on top of it, that's your commission, and the manager goes and does the deal. It's quite possible that what the manager does is go to that person, the debtor, the person who has the account and says, look, let's just cut it to this, sign the new paper. He's cutting himself out of the deal. That's a possibility. The other possibility is that in the Jewish law, you were not allowed to charge interest, right? So how do you get around charging interest? You charge more, you charge double. You kind of hide the idea of, I can't charge interest, so I'll just jack up the price and I'll kind of stick you with it. Right? So now what the possibility is that the manager he knows what's going on. He's at the inside track. He goes to the vendor and he says, look, I'm gonna cut you in on the deal. I'm gonna cut it from 900 to 450, from 1,000 to 800. I'm gonna cut you in. At this point, the owner can't say anything because he's gouged the vendor. The vendor's not gonna say anything because I'm getting a sweet deal and I don't wanna bring it up. And the manager's kind of sitting there in the middle and benefiting from this. Now, in that culture, regardless of which way it happens, in that culture of honor and shame, the person who's receiving the benefit now feels honored by the manager and now feels indebted to that manager. What is the manager trying to ultimately do? He's like, I don't know what's gonna happen. If I get kicked out of my house, I gotta go couch surf on some other people's houses. And so he's creating friendships. He's creating relationships. I gotta figure out how I'm gonna make it. Maybe they'll offer me a job. Maybe someone will feel like they owe me a favor and now take me in. And you see in the story, what the owner does is he sees what happens and goes, well done, you got me, right? He realizes that in some way that and what he commends is this idea of shrewdness, of being shrewd. Now, when you think about that idea a little bit, Jesus in verses 8 and 9, notice he's making the observation. Here is his sermon a little bit. So he's told the story and notice what he says. He says, he uses the story to illustrate something. The people of this world, they'll work hard, they'll grind, they'll be clever in what they do. Why? So that they can make it in this world. And he's commending in some ways the hard work or the initiative and intuitiveness of figuring things out. But what he's also doing is he's helping them understand that they're acting shrewdly in terms of worldly things, their place in this world. But notice what he's also doing. He's also making a commentary that faced with the reality of eternal things, if only the people of light, if only the children of light thought the same way about eternal things. Part of his commentary here, what he's saying is, look, we're a part of eternal things, and you'll work and grind and come up with stuff so that you could climb the ladder in this world. What if, don't you wish that we would think that same way, we'd put that same effort, we would work that same kind of way for eternal things? What he's pressing in this is he's lamenting a little bit, that if only God's people would work this hard for the eternal things instead of just working this hard for worldly things. There's two things I want to bring to your attention today. Here's the first one, that the way of Jesus invites us to be shrewd with our resources for eternal purposes. Eternal purposes. He's challenging his disciples to invest their worldly wealth, their worldly resources into things that will allow them to develop friendships for eternal dwellings. See, what he's giving them is, what if you invested yourself in such things and in such people, when you're welcomed into your eternal home, those people who you were invested in are there to greet you, are there to welcome you. This is what he's saying. Why do we work so hard, invest so much in a life that won't last? What if instead you were invested in the things that last forever? What if you were invested in the things and the focus of your life was about the kingdom of God? And by making those investments, those people were the ones who were welcoming you into this place. And so again, you see that he's challenging us. One, don't be like the world. Don't just grind and invest and act shrewdly so that you climb the ladder of this world. Instead, he's challenging them to act shrewdly. Now, in the New Testament, I don't know how you would feel. I don't think any of you are using the word shrewd in your online profile, right? It's kind of a word that we're like, I'm not sure if it's a compliment. I would just say in the New Testament, it is always used in the positive, right? It's this idea of being cunning, of wise, of decisive, of figuring out a way. And Jesus is using it here. He's saying, if only we, the people of light, the children of God, would act such a way with the resources God has given us for eternal purposes, that we would invest in eternal life. Now, I'm thinking about this yesterday, and there's something called imaginative prayer. It's an exercise where you place yourself in the story. Right? And part of what you're trying to do is trying to imagine yourself being in the story and thinking about whether you're one of the characters or you're just a bystander. And so yesterday, I'm walking my dog on the river trail, and I'm trying to just pray through this and think through this, right? The investment someone makes and the way that because of that investment, the way that this kind of welcome that happens in eternal places, this kind of eternal friendship that happens. And I'm thinking about this, and I'm trying to imagine and think of what it was like. And so I start to kind of imagine myself in my, however this works, in the new heaven, new earth, and I'm kind of walking around with Jesus. And Jesus says, Thousand Pines, 1984, right? That's when you became a Christian. That's when you chose to follow me. And I would say, yeah, that was incredible. Like, that camp changed my life. I don't know how to explain it. I don't know how a 15-year-old could figure it out, but all I know is I can point to that moment. Everything changed for me. My life was never the same after that moment. And he says, and you got a scholarship to go to that camp, right? I said, yeah, I only paid $20 the deposit, and someone else had to pay the other $100. It was awesome. I mean, our family, a single mom family, like, we just couldn't afford it. I didn't even know what a camp was. We couldn't do it. And he walks me up and he taps this woman on the shoulder and he says, and he introduces me to this woman. She's the one who paid your scholarship to go to that camp. and we embrace. And I kid you not, and I'll try not to do it right now, but I just started weeping. I'm walking my dog on this trail, and thankfully I have my sunglasses on and my hat down, and I'm just like weeping because it just occurred to me, like someone made an investment in me. Someone didn't just give God $100 to keep God off their back. Someone believed in Jeffrey's vision to invest in young people. Someone believed in the power of Christian Camp, and someone donated the $100 so I could go, and my life was changed, and we're embracing. There's this sense of that the welcome in eternal places, and I'm crying. And I'm filled with the Spirit in such a powerful way that it's like, Lord, gosh, I want to do that. I want to be invested in those kinds of things. And I began to think through this a little bit more. There's so many stories that I could tell you of my time here, of people who have made investments of their time or talent or treasure, so that in some ways, there's a sense of people coming together in this eternal embrace of thankfulness and welcome. Like you played a role with God so that I could be here. I mean, there's this crazy idea that God doesn't need us, but boy, does he sure delight in using us. And you're being invited by Jesus into this stuff. Notice what Jesus is saying as he continues to press on after the parable is worldly stuff will diminish. What are you using for eternal things? Is your money, is your use of possessions, is it bringing you closer to God, or can you be trusted with those things, the resources that God is putting in your care? Now you have to connect verse 10 with the concept of money throughout the passage. In fact, Luke, he brings up the topic of money at least 10 times in his gospel account. One of the things that he's trying to say is it's not that God's trying to get your money. It's all about trying, if you notice in here, he's trying to protect your heart. What he notices is that money, he's trying to protect your soul. What is good for your soul? And he's not trying to pretend that this isn't an issue for us. It was an issue for them then, it's an issue for us. Notice, the most religious people, the people who are considered the most godly in the culture, they're having the roughest time with this. Notice with the commentary that they loved money. They detested what Jesus said. They were sneering at him, and Jesus is saying, do you understand that the condition of your heart, you justify yourself in front of the people, you explain it away, but God sees it. And if you've got to hear the warning, and God finds that condition of your heart detestable. For Kim and I, we try to really protect our heart in this. We know God doesn't need our money, but we know he wants to protect our heart. And we know that unchecked, we will love money. I will. If I go unchecked, I will. And so there's two things that we practice on a weekly basis. First is what's called the first fruit. In this idea of first fruit, it's just giving God what is first. So in the Old Testament, we see is this practice. You give God what was first with confidence that God would provide what's next. So you can imagine if you have what's first, you have it in hand. And so as dad's giving things away, the kids are going, whoa, dad, if you give away this, what do we have? He says, don't worry, God will provide. It's an act of faith. It's an act of faith to say, what I have in hand, I give first to you, trusting that you will provide whatever it is left that I need. And so I wake up on Sunday morning very early, and I see that our recurring gift has already gone through. Thank you for your gift to Beachpoint Church. And we've set it up that way so that that's how it happens. The first thing that we spend money on every week is our giving to God. Now, what we give is called a tithe. And a tithe, again, it's a choice of a way to give. And again, it's saying that the first tenth goes to God, and then whatever else is there that he has entrusted to us. Now, we're trying to grow in that, give away more than 10%, but there's a commitment that we'll do at least that. And part of that faith, again, is two things. One, we give as act of worship, and two, we give as an act of investment. We believe in investing in our kids and our youth and our missionaries. And I know you guys like air conditioning, so someone has to chip in to pay for that, right? So I'm invested in things here because I believe in that, and we give that. Here's what I've come to believe, is that 90% plus God has always been worth more to us than Kim and I at 100%. I won't try to explain. I don't believe in prosperity theology. I'm not gonna tell you if you give to God, God will make you rich. I will say this though, I believe the promise to be true that as you give prayerfully and thoughtfully, God will provide for your needs. He just has done that for us as long as we've been together. Now, early on in our marriage, Kim and I had a big heart for it. We did not have good practice for it. We always thought we were giving, we weren't. And so we had to figure out how to kind of clean up our act. And I would just say, probably a lot of you have a very big heart for this. There are some very simple systems to put in place to protect your heart, to practice this. I would encourage you with this. Now, I simply share that with you because I would never ask you to do anything I'm not willing to do myself. See, I know something is that we have a core value here, and it's to be generous. And the core value of generosity is simply this, that we know we're at our best when we're being generous with our time, our talent, and our treasure. Just think about it. Think about the stories. Think about Christmas, right? Project Hope. We said the first thing that we're gonna give away in our Christmas offering is not for us, it's for the people in need in our local and global missions. And our hope was about $20,000 would go in those projects. We far exceeded that. You were able to help over 46 families locally, as well as a number of our missionaries who were able to get projects. But think about this, as you were able to give to Project Hope, the cool thing was, we didn't dress up like elves, show up, push parents out of the way, give their kids presents or things like that. Some of it was presents, some of it was things, but we empowered Ocean View High School, the Resource Center, Common Ground. We came alongside our missionaries to help think through this stuff. What you guys were able to do was to bless families. Now, I did have a chance to go on, to kind of check in on some of these things and help deliver some of the stuff, and people were just like blown away. Why do you guys do this stuff? Like, what's in the water you guys drink over there? Like, people were they just didn't understand that kind of generosity. But you also were able to help some incredible things happen with our global missionaries, new initiatives that they are a part of. Think about Daring Faith. Some of you were a part of Daring Faith and how powerful that was, where people made sacrifices because we were so impacted we needed a new building, we needed new spaces. Now, certainly the pavilion's amazing. It turned out to be an incredible timing for a COVID facility, but it gets used 6 days a week. It is used for all kinds of things. Monday, Celebrate Recovery, Tuesday, kids, Wednesday, high school, Thursday, Celebrate Recovery, Friday and Saturday, we host different events in there. Sunday, it typically can be some weeks, every week. One of the things, when it used to be a basketball court there, I would just come late at night and walk around in circles just praying that it would happen. And one of the things I'd be praying for would be the incredible people who would be raised up in this space. One of the first things that we got to host in there was a group of missionaries with Frontiers Missions who we support, and they were being trained. And I walked in and I got to meet everyone. And as I walked out, I thought, oh my goodness, this group of people, these 50 people in here, they're being trained to go to the hardest places in the world to bring the gospel. They're going in places where they may be in prison, they may be killed, but they're sitting in this room that you guys helped sacrifice for to bring the gospel to these last corners of the earth. And that Ebenezer that is out in the, it's a memorial of all those stones, right? It's a sign of every one of you doing some little part. It wasn't one person, it was all these different people doing their small little part to make it happen. It was incredible to see. And it's a sign to us of what we're capable of when we're invested in eternal things. We have a benevolent fund, which is used to assist Beachpoint families. You can do it online or you can do it through the envelopes here if you want to give here. And it's helping people in our church family who find themselves in kind of a needed moment. And it's incredible to watch the sovereignty of God work in this, because people give, not knowing exactly who they're giving to, but the way it gets matched up. Just recently, our sojourners, our senior Sunday school class, they gave me a gift for this. And they said, do you know of a family that maybe needs some help? About 2 days later, I came in contact with a family that really needed some assistance. And to be able to match those things together, it was powerful for that family to feel like, how did God know? And the pastors were just messengers. It's just this beautiful act of you listening to God and God saying to people who are in very vulnerable positions, I see you. I see you. You're not alone in this. And it's powerful. Our food pantry, next Sunday we'll collect for our food pantry, and so many of you have added to your just normal shopping, groceries, diapers, whatever, to give away to very vulnerable families, some of the people dealing with significant poverty in our city. And the ways that you guys are doing this is significant. One of the things that becomes so powerful as everyone is giving to this is that there's this way in which you're just simply realizing God has provided for us. What extra can we do to provide for others in need? And again, people are blown away by your incredible generosity. There's so many stories to tell. Think about all the investment you make into the next generation. The kids, the youth, Jackie and Justin and Brandon have built teams of about 100 different people, and they're invested in our young people. They're helping out in different ways of what's happening. And as they help together, pulling these different things together, I remember one person walked up or called me. He says, I need to talk to you. And I was like, oh, I'm in trouble. It was just kind of short. And he called me, like, meet me outside in 10 minutes. So I was waiting outside. He came up, he walked up, went to shake my hand. And inside, he said, there was something in his hand. He held my hand for a second. He said, just make sure no kid gets left home from camp. There was a $5,000 check inside. And I think about that way of someone just saying, I'm invested in what is about to take place. I think of our missionaries. We have 21 different projects that we're involved in. Many of those people are your friends who were sitting in these pews who are now all over the world. It's Tammy and Eric and Amy and Taylor and Heidi and Lindsay and Kira and Joseph and Amy and Renaud and Karen and Tim that all have Beachpoint ties. We're gonna send a team down to Mexico in May, and we hope some of you will be a part of that. You being a part of these eternal things, of bringing the gospel all over the world. We have actually a ninth grade girls team that we're sending to Belize this summer. And someone would say, oh, wouldn't it be better to just send $10,000 to Belize to help the poor kids? That would be helpful, and there's no question. But we're trying to think beyond addition to multiplication. How can we turn these 10 girls into a group of people who, one, for the rest of their life, have a heart of compassion for God's world? How can these 10 girls have a heart of compassion for these kids for the rest of their lives? How can these girls see what our missionaries are part of, and maybe they themselves become the next Tammy, the next Tyler or Taylor, the next Heidi? We want to think multiplication. Now, I don't like really asking for your money, to be honest, but I don't mind asking you to be invested in this kind of stuff, to be invested in these kinds of projects, because these are eternal things. And so let me close with this thought. What you see is that Jesus says this, that the way of Jesus calls us to love God over the temptation to love money and worldly possessions. I mean, what he's trying to guard for you is a love of money, a service of money, that becoming a slave to wealth. Jesus wants you to manage it, not the other way around. He wants you to be seeing yourself giving this stuff away for the purposes of eternal things. And again, notice the way that he challenges actually the religious leaders whose hearts are set on this, because in their culture, they thought that was a sign of God's blessing. And there standing before them is this poor itinerant preacher from Nazareth. Can anything good come out of Nazareth? And they think he lacks the blessing of God, because look at him. And yet what they miss, because their hearts are wrapped in the wrong thing, is standing before them as the very Messiah they have been praying for and hoping for and wishing God would send. And they can't see him. What Jesus has been inviting them, and we've seen this over these last weeks, is to live with eternity in mind. This is going to be the theme kind of going up to summer, as we see at the resurrection, that between the resurrection and ascension is the return. We are living in this in-between time. And so the question is, how do you live knowing Christ is coming back? How do you live in this space, in this time? Live with eternity in mind. That's what we will look at after Christmas. So I want to give you a response. Ask the Lord to show you this. How can you generously invest yourself and your resources into the eternal kingdom of God? Okay, don't worry about anyone else. Think about this. Ask the Lord, Lord, how do I do this? How do I invest myself into the resources you've given me into the eternal kingdom of God? And we've looked at the idea of money, but maybe even think about other parts. Your position. Some of you are bosses. How do you steward that opportunity to, in essence, pastor and care for the people under your care? Some of you are teachers. You have students, you have families that are under your care. Think about how do you steward proximity? Remember, 8 to 15 is thinking about the idea that God has supernaturally and strategically put people in your life. How do you steward that opportunity that God has given you right now? How do you manage well the experience, the talent that you have? Some of you have great wisdom or experience, or you can invest what you are and what you have into other people, whether it become a kids leader or a youth leader. He's gonna be embarrassed because I don't think he knows I'm gonna do this, but Mitchell is, he's a very brilliant artist. He's got 3 songs at least on Apple Music right now. But Mitchell is writing songs for our kids to sing. And he's writing the songs that you're gonna listen to in your minivan over and over again for the next 8 months. But one of the cool things and I don't know anyone like him that would do this, but he's invested in himself. He's investing his talent. And one of the cool things is he's giving some of that away to a young girl named Darby this year, who she was saying the other day at my house, I get to sing one of the songs. And I was just like, this is what Jesus is talking about. What if you took your energy and you took your know-how and you took what God has given you and you invested it in eternal things? What if you were as shrewd with what God has given you for eternal things as you are for earthly things? May the Lord not lament over Beachpoint for this. So let me invite you to pray. Just ask the Lord, what investment could I make this week? Let's take it out of the clouds. Let's put it into our feet. Let's ask over the next 6 days, what is it that you can do? Take a moment to pray through that, and we'll close with a final song.